Got 3 mistakes that I want to let you guys know that you really need to avoid. And I'm going to talk about mistakes. Got lots of things to say about making mistakes in beekeeping. Hey everybody, David Burns, good to be with you again. And let's jump right into it because the month of November can mean different things depending on where you live. So sometimes that's confusing. So let me just say that right now I'm about 7 weeks into fall or autumn. So you can do the math wherever you live and kind of calculate that out. I'm located in the central US in the Midwest. So we have pretty aggressive winters usually, although they've been a little bit milder more recently. So this is what you should be thinking about after you're getting kind of like in the middle of fall. And for me, that's the month of November. And the first thing I want to encourage you, the mistake not to make is stay out. Don't make the mistake of getting into your hive too often or when it's the wrong time to get into your hive. Now, it's possible where you live that you can get in there. We always need temperatures to be about 65 degrees Fahrenheit in order to draw frames up and inspect the brood area. Now, you can open up boxes, you can open up tops if you need to change out your fondant or your candy or something in the wintertime, as long as you don't pull up a frame of brood, because you can chill the brood, especially developing pupae, and kill pupae. And when you're changing out your candy or something, we'll talk about that in a minute, but it can be done quite quickly and the bees aren't really none the worse for it. So stay out. I know you're tempted to go in there and look for stuff, but if it's below 65 degrees Fahrenheit, not a good thing to be in your hive. Plus, if you're headed for winter, no matter where you live, and you feel like it's warm enough to go out there and inspect, and you're close to winter, like I am, a little over a month away from winter, it's not a good time to be inspecting, opening your hive up, primarily because you can accidentally kill your queen. And it's going to be really hard to replace her now. You can't really get queens late in the year like that. The second mistake that beekeepers often make is they assume that the bees don't need fed. Now, it's possible that your bees don't need any resources. They've packed it all in them and the hive themselves. They have plenty of bee bread, maybe. They have plenty of honey. They have plenty of nectar in there. And so you really don't have to worry about it. You're probably thinking, okay, I know how much is in there. It's a heavy hive. They're really good. I'll have to super on. And you really may not have to feed your bees at all. I created the Winter Be Kind. What do they say? The greatest inventions are out of necessity, something like that. But I just wanted an insurance plan for my bees in case they did run out of food. And so I really feel like if we can have something on there just in case winters do go long and the bees do kind of eat more food than we thought, then it's good to have insurance. Very quickly, let me say that just because winters are more mild than usual doesn't mean they're eating less food. It means the opposite. The more warm or mild a winter is, the more active the bees are in the hive and the more food they consume. And then if you have a cold snap after that, it's really hard on bees. They've eaten all their food, then it turns cold like in the middle or late winter, and they've consumed all their food because previously winter was warmer. Why can't we get good weather? Why can't we get weather that cooperates in beekeeping? It just doesn't happen. Welcome to farming. Welcome to agriculture. Welcome to trying to take care of animals. And, you know, bees are animals. There's 2 kingdoms, right? The plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. It's hard to keep the weather just right for the bees. So get back to feeding. I really think it's a good idea to keep some emergency food on there, even when you think all is well. There's many ways you can feed your bees. If you go way back in time, people were just pouring dry table sugar in on top of an inner cover, trying to get them some food in there. And a lot of people still do put dry, I call it dry sugar, just table sugar in there for bees. That may work in the best circumstances, but in the worst circumstances, it probably won't work. It's so dry that it takes moisture for bees to consume it. That's the tough thing about it. Now, sometimes it's called things like, I think, the mountain camp method, where you put dry blocks of sugar in there. If you have enough moisture that the bees are producing in the hive, that can help the bees consume that sugar. But if there's no moisture to really break that sugar down, it's tough. Now, I often say bees only eat liquid. Everything a bee eats, they eat through a straw called their proboscis. It's not really a straw, but it kind of is. And so they really don't have chewing, they don't chew food like we do. They don't eat steaks. Now they do have the ability to kind of chew at stuff. You know, sometimes they eat pollen, or they'll eat, pollen substitute patties, pollen patties. And so they can nibble at things, but their primary way of consuming their food is by drinking it. You know, they drink nectar. They ingest nectar, and the pollen grains are in that nectar. And so we really are better off to try to help the bees more easily consume rather than just give them dry sugar. But the second way that you can feed bees is by a candy board. Now, we make winter bee kinds, and they're made in such a way where the colony produces heat that causes the sugar to actually become more pliable for the bees to eat or consume. It kind of liquefies from their heat so they can consume it. Other people use fondant. Fondant is a way that you can place the fondant material on top of the bees, and they'll go up there and eat it. Now, they're using their heat again to make that more edible. So it's important to realize the bees' heat, the moisture in the hive, is going to make the candy more edible in the winter. Do you need to feed in winter? Before you leave a comment and say you never have and you've had great success, good for you. I'm not saying you need to feed. I'm just saying insurance doesn't hurt to have something on there. In my case, I raise a lot of bees in the wintertime, and to do that, I need to give them a lot of food, including my winter bee kind boards that has other additives in there to help them continue to raise brood. Now, I got another great tip, but Bobblehead David is here on the table, encouraging you guys to please subscribe. He's got sunglasses on because he likes to steal the focal plane of my camera with his eyes. So I had to put sunglasses on him. A great YouTube viewer made those glasses or sent those to me to put on Bobblehead David. But and some of you asked where I got Bobblehead David. Sherry had it made. It does kind of look like me a little bit, yeah. So please subscribe. Appreciate it. Now let's get to the third tip on what to do in November with your bees. The third tip is really all about winterizing your hive. One of the things you might want to think about, because it's still maybe not too cold to do these things. One of the things is I like to level my hives up. And I've talked about this several times in videos in the past years, but boy, sometimes I can go into winter with a nice level hive like this, and I come out of the winter, the thing's about ready to fall over, and I have to really work fast, because what happens where I live, the ground freezes and thaws and freezes and thaws, and it heaves. And so it just starts, hives start changing because the ground that they're on, the stand even, can start shifting. You ever had that? Leave a comment if you've seen your hive shift in the wintertime. We have that problem here in Illinois with our soil. And so go out there now and level it off. It's better to start level than to be a little crooked and let winter take its toll and make it more crooked. So as you can see here, Pat and I are working to level my meanest hive. And so we're trying to level this hive off by putting things under the ground, under the hive stand on the ground, so that it's more level going into winter. So do consider leveling your hive. Another tip on winterizing your hive is to wrap it. A lot of debate on that. I mean, boy, there is debate on whether you should wrap your hive or not. A lot of us feel like it's not as important as the other things that are more important. And what I mean by that is, don't depend on wrapping to save your hive from mites and viruses, poor nutrition, a poor queen, and not enough food on board. If you don't have the essentials of those things going on, I don't care how much you wrap, it's not going to help. But if you have a good queen that laid well all year, you've got good bees of winter physiology, you've got a good amount of food on there, you don't have any virus loads from the mites, you kept mites under control, then wrapping is probably going to benefit you, especially if you live in a very cold climate. I don't worry about wrapping that much because I feel like bees can make enough heat that they don't need to, each hive need to be wrapped. Sometimes I wonder if we don't baby our hives so much. And if you stop and think about it, in fact, somebody left a comment on one of my videos that if we're constantly babying our bees by wrapping them, aren't we breeding for bees that can't survive winter? Well, anyway, I think that a better thing to do is to provide a wind block. Now, the wind can pound on those bee hives and really just kind of suck all the heat out of the hive. So a wind block that's maybe a couple of feet, 3 feet away from the hive, a wind block can really help a lot. Now, before I share my last tip, let me encourage you to join me for my live stream every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central Time. Love having you guys here for 59 minutes of beekeeping fun, the camaraderie, the community, the family, just sharing together. A lot of us are getting to know each other quite well through our live stream. We recognize the names, we recognize each other, and it's fun just to be together. And we have hundreds of people that join us every Thursday night that are beekeepers. It's fun, a lot of interaction in the chat. Please join me Thursday night, 7 p.m. Hope to see you there. Now, the last tip I want to share with you guys regarding winterizing is it's probably a good idea to go around your hive and make sure it's sealed up really well. We're really hard on hives. With our hive tools, as good as they're supposed to work and not really destroying the corners of our hives, we can still really make some damage to our hives during the summer by inspecting them with that hive tool. So you might want to take a close look, make sure there's not gaping holes in your hive. And if you see some, find a way to seal them. You don't have to follow some exact beekeeping way to seal them. You might want to use metal tape like you can see me using here. If you see a big hole, it looks like a mouse chewed through that. But you might just use Gorilla Tape. You might, whatever your method is. If you can seal it, that's going to help the bees a lot. It might keep a lot of critters out too, like mice and so on. So do an inspection around the outside of your hive. Make sure you don't have problems. And if you do, be aggressive and seal that off and help the bees out a bit. Now, this video is all about avoiding mistakes, but I want to talk to you about maybe there's some mistakes that you need to make. Ooh, what does that mean? Well, listen, I really think beekeepers really need to have a lot of skin in the game. A lot of times as beekeepers, we can always play it safe, especially new beekeepers that are so fearful of messing up, killing their hive, make a mistake, killing the queen. All the fear of just losing the colony can cause some beekeepers, especially new beekeepers, to be so overprotective and so scared about failing that they make the biggest mistake of all. And that's really not experimenting, not going out on a limb, coloring outside the line. We really learn our best lessons when we mess up. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm here to tell you, I started beekeeping almost 30 years ago, and I've made a lot of mistakes. And I'm not done making mistakes yet. I mean, none of us as beekeepers are perfect. I wrote an article for Bee Culture. I write for the Bee Culture magazine, a monthly column. And when I submitted it, it was about making mistakes. And Jerry Hayes, the editor, wrote back to me. And I thought it was interesting because I view Jerry as a very, very highly intelligent, well-versed beekeeper in the beekeeping community. And he said that article meant to me was that, yeah, we're all still learning. He said, I don't know everything. And none of us know everything. But one of the things we have to realize is we're better off when we confess or admit that we don't know everything. If you know everything, what else can you learn about bees? When the rubber hits the road, friend, it boils down to what you have learned by hands-on experience in the hive. It really does. You read all the books, go to all the conferences, take all that information down, and say, wow, I went to that conference, I went to that conference, I learned this, I heard that speaker, I read that book, I watched that video. But when it comes right down to it, when you open a hive up and you see something, then it's all up to you to decide, what do I do? It may not be nicely packaged in a conference speaker's presentation. You might see something that nobody has ever addressed, that you didn't read about in a book. Your situation is so unique, and what you need to be able to learn is to not rely on other people to give you fast answers. Don't rely on ChatGPT to give you a quick answer. You need to learn to be able to know in your mind, in your own experience and knowledge on what to do next. And the only way to get there, spending time in the hive, making your own mistakes. Now, I'm not telling you to be, careless, clumsy, ignoring science, don't worry about learning and just, learn as you go. That's not always the best plan either, although it probably basically what I did. But there's a balance. Now there's so much more available than when I started. You can learn a lot about bees so you make fewer mistakes. And so what you need to do is give yourself permission to go out on a limb and try to solve a lot of these beekeeping problems yourself rather than always depending upon somebody else to give you the answer. And I think that's paramount when you're wanting to improve your beekeeping skills and your management, is to really be able to do that on your own. But it does take years of experience. I'm going to say it's going to take about 3 to 5 years of beekeeping pretty regularly in your hives before you really start to be able to have that vast knowledge of experience that you can rely on. And you know the answers when you start seeing things and you're not dependent upon so much other people telling you what to do. That comes from us being able to not freak out when we make a mistake. Because no matter how long you keep bees, you're going to make a mistake. Every year you'll make a mistake. It's inevitable. You try to avoid it, but we're all going to make mistakes. Now, I know some of you are watching and you made some mistakes last year, right? Oh, I made a mistake. You're saying to yourself, oh, I don't know if I'm going to get through winter because I didn't do this and I did that too much or too little. I don't think I fed them. I don't know if I controlled mites the way that I should. I might have made a mistake by doing this or that. Keep good notes, make notes of your mistakes, and learn from your mistakes. One example of learning from our mistakes, you may not understand how important it is during the beekeeping season to really protect your queen during a hive inspection. And you might accidentally smash her between frames. You mishandle your frames, you kill the queen. When you feel yourself killing the queen, or you know you killed her because you mishandled her, that is a powerful mistake. In fact, you will probably never do that again, or at least not as frequently, because you've learned that, ooh, I need to have a way to better protect my queen when I'm doing a hive inspection. I've made a lot of videos on teaching you guys how to put her in a queen cage, how to pull out the frame she's on, and then you can inspect the other frames without killing her. But once you make a mistake like that, it really does sear it in your mind in such a way you're less likely to make that mistake again. Similarly, you come out of winter, your colony is strong, and you make the mistake of not instituting your swarm control method. And so what happens is all spring, your colony or your colonies just swarm and swarm and swarm, and off to the trees they go. And you wanted to make splits, you wanted more bees, but they're swarming, you can't stop it. And you're like, oh, I made such a big mistake this year. Sometimes when colonies swarm in the spring, they don't always raise a queen like they're supposed to, especially if she goes out to get mated and she gets eaten by a bird. There's no more eggs back home. Now you have to intervene and introduce your a purchased queen that's mated to save that hive. So it's risky when bees swarm. So if you're not prepared, then you make a mistake of not controlling swarms. Once you do that, you're like, okay, I've learned my lesson. I made a mistake of not controlling swarms like I need to. This spring, I'm going to institute a better swarm control method. Another big mistake that beekeepers make that kind of teaches us that we should never do that again, and we're all guilty of it at times, is that we really don't control mites as strategically as we should. We might throw a treatment in there once or twice a year. We might kind of do a test once or twice a year. We don't realize how aggressive the viral destructor mites are on our bees. And so sometimes we don't take the mites as seriously. I know I don't always take them as serious as I should. I'm sometimes thinking, okay, the hive looks good. Maybe mites aren't that bad, right? Well, you don't know unless you do a test. And sometimes you do a test and you're like, whoa, wow, uh-oh, hive's in trouble. I've done that plenty of times, thinking it was okay. And then when I did a test, I was behind the eight ball a lot. I was like, man, I'm going to lose this hive because of the number of mites. I should have been on the ball. So if that's you, and it's been me, and it will be me in the future, I'm sure, then we learn from our mistakes. I need to keep my mites under control. It's not about just killing mites to kill mites, but they spread viruses, and the viruses is what kills our bees. So if we can reduce the mites, we're reducing the viral loads in the hive. So these are examples of making mistakes do help us gain the experience that sometimes you're not going to gain at a conference or on a video or in a bee club or in a class. Out there in the field, and you feel the pressure, you feel the tension of making the mistake, it really does help us to learn and add to our wealth of knowledge on how to avoid making that same mistake again. I like what Theodore Roosevelt said, "The man who never makes a mistake is a man who never does anything." So in beekeeping, if you're doing something in beekeeping, it's inevitable we're going to make mistakes. Are you having trouble finding eggs when you do your hive inspection? I got a great video that will help you learn the art of looking for eggs to make sure you got a good laying queen. Check this video out right here. See you guys over there.